Welcome back to our channel. Today, we are exploring one of the best-selling books in human history.
Throughout history, only a very small number of books have reached hundreds of millions or even billions of readers around the world. These books have influenced cultures, shaped beliefs, inspired generations, and completely changed the course of history. In this explainer, we will discover the fascinating story behind the Bible, including its author, historical background, hidden facts, controversies, and the exact reasons why it became one of the most widely read books ever published. Let's begin our journey into the world of one of history's greatest books. I want you to picture a book so widely printed that if you stacked up every copy ever made, it would literally circle the earth multiple times. It's almost hard to wrap your head around. Researchers estimate that between 5 and 7 billion copies of the Bible have been printed since its text was standardized roughly 1,500 years ago. To put that unimaginable scale into perspective for a second, the second best-selling book of all time is Quotations from Chairman Mao, which sold around 1 billion copies. The Bible eclipses that by 5 to 7 times. And it hasn't slowed down. Roughly 100 million new copies are printed every single year. All right, so here is our agenda for today. We'll start with its status as the ultimate global bestseller, explore how it's an anthology of many authors, walk through a millennium of history, look inside the two testaments, touch on some major debates and controversies, and finally, examine its massive legacy beyond religion. Let's jump right in. Section 1. The ultimate global bestseller. Let's look at exactly what gives this book its unprecedented reach. The sheer linguistic footprint we're looking at here is just absolutely staggering. This isn't just a localized phenomenon. The Bible has been translated, at least partially, into over 4,000 languages. That reaches an estimated 7.3 billion people. The complete cover-to-cover text is available in over 750 languages. And here's a really fascinating side effect of this. Because so many translators worked so hard to adopt it into local dialects, these translation projects were historically the very reason some languages received a written alphabet for the absolute first time. Beyond just a massive print volume, the physical history of this text holds astonishing value. Just as a testament to its enduring historical significance, a rare, incredibly old handwritten Hebrew Bible sold at auction in 2023 for over $38 million. $38 million. That really underscores how, whether it's mass-produced on a factory line or uniquely preserved through the centuries, the text holds a monumental place in human history. Moving right along to Section 2, an anthology of many authors. Because the creation of this book defies pretty much all traditional publishing norms. So here is the crucial thing to understand. It's actually an anthology. It is a collection of many different literary works, compiled into a single volume. Instead of one single author sitting at a desk, most scholars estimate it was written by roughly 35 to 40 different people over a massive span of time. And it definitely wasn't just written in one language either. The original texts were composed in Hebrew, Aramaic, and Koine Greek, which was the common trade language of the Eastern Roman Empire back in the day. What makes this anthology so incredibly unique is the sheer diversity of its contributors. The writers spanned across what is today Israel, Egypt, Greece, and Turkey, and they represented a really unusual, mixed group of occupations. We're talking shepherds who became kings, like David, royalty famous for their wisdom, like Solomon, everyday fishermen, a tax collector named Matthew, and even a physician named Luke. There is no single life story behind the book. It's this massive, sweeping collection of individual human experiences. And this brilliantly illustrates a core duality in how the text is studied today. To be completely impartial here, we have to acknowledge two main viewpoints. From a faith perspective, believers view this extremely diverse authorship as divinely inspired, meaning those human writers were directly guided by God. Conversely, from a historical and academic perspective, scholars treat it as a heavily edited human compilation, assembled and refined over many, many centuries. Both of these viewpoints are absolutely essential to understanding the book's global impact. That brings us to Section 3, a millennium of history. Let's set the scene and look at the turbulent era of its creation. Across a massive 1,500-year span, these authors were influenced by some profound historical shocks. You have the early Old Testament era kicking off around 1200 BCE. Then, a huge turning point hits in 586 BCE, the traumatic Babylonian exile, where the elite of Judah were taken captive. A lot of scholars actually believe a major chunk of the Old Testament was heavily edited during this specific time as the community scrambled to preserve its identity. Fast forward to 30 CE, and the New Testament era is unfolding under the heavy taxation and intense political tension of the Roman Empire, eventually wrapping up around 100 CE. Section 4. Inside the Two Testaments. With all that history in mind, how is this massive ancient text actually organized? The structure broadly breaks down into two main sections. First, you have the Old Testament, or Hebrew Bible. This consists of about 39 books, focusing heavily on the history, laws, worship practices, and identity of the Israelite people. Second, there's the New Testament. That consists of 27 books, focusing on the life and teachings of Jesus and the really rapid spread of those early Christian communities scattered all across the Roman Empire. But dive underneath that overarching structure, and you'll find an incredible mix of literary genres. You aren't just reading a novel here. You're reading historical accounts, ancient civil law codes, deeply emotional poetry, prophetic warnings, personal letters called epistles, sent to young churches, and some highly symbolic apocalyptic visions. Yet, what captivates so many readers is that despite this wild mix of genres and authors, it remarkably reads as one continuous overarching story, running all the way from the creation of the world to a promised future.
Section 5. Debates and Controversies. As you might expect with a text this old and influential, there are plenty of scholarly disputes.
For example, let's look at the first 5 books, often called the Torah or a Pentateuch. Traditional faith credits Moses as the sole author of these texts. However, the mainstream academic view today is something called the documentary hypothesis. This theory argues that these books were not actually written by one person, but were instead compiled from multiple older sources and carefully woven together by editors over many centuries.
And the debates definitely don't stop at authorship. Archaeologists and historians are constantly debating the historical accuracy of events, like the sheer scale of the Exodus. Then you have canon disputes, meaning different religious groups fundamentally disagree on which books even belong in the Bible, like the inclusion of the Apocrypha. Linguists argue over translation choices that can actually change religious doctrine. And crucially, ethicists and historians debate how we interpret ancient social laws regarding slavery, violence, and the treatment of women when held up against modern ethics.
Finally, Section 6. A legacy beyond religion. Let's zoom out and look at its staggering global impact. I mean, just consider these milestones for a second. First, it literally launched the modern book industry. The very first major book ever printed on Johannes Gutenberg's revolutionary press back in 1454 was the Bible. Second, it has deeply shaped Western law, art, and literature. It gave us common phrases we still use every single day. And third, its reach has extended far beyond our planet. The text was famously read aloud by astronauts orbiting the moon on the Apollo 8 mission in 1968. Its cultural impact is absolute. Now, looking at history objectively, we have to note that this text is a deeply complex historical tool. Throughout centuries, the language within this book has been utilized by humans to justify terrible, terrible oppression, including slavery and colonialism. Yet at the exact same time, it has served as the foundational text for powerful liberation movements. It drove abolitionists and inspired leaders of the U.S. Civil Rights Movement, like Martin Luther King Jr. It is truly a text that has moved the levers of history in multiple directions. But here's what's truly fascinating. You might assume that in our highly digital, increasingly secular modern era, interest in some ancient anthology would naturally just fade away, right? Well, actually, U.S. Bible sales reportedly increased by about 22% in 2022. Millions of people still read it daily for guidance, while scholars continue to meticulously mine it for historical data. So we will leave you with this final thought to ponder. After more than 2 millennia, dramatic historical shifts, and the absolute explosion of the digital age, why does this ancient compilation continue to shape the course of human history and captivate our minds so deeply today? Thank you so much for joining us on this explainer, and remember to keep questioning the world around you.